Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available starting Monday, August 19th at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. He's Justin King. Today, we're reacting to some news that broke over the weekend in regards to Penn State football's roster. Defensive end Jameial Lyons and linebacker Kaveion Keys are no longer with the team. It initially began as a suspension, and now they are officially off the Penn State football program. They are no longer enrolled at Penn State University. The football team didn't provide too much of an explanation as to what exactly happened during media days that have gone down recently, avoiding talking about the situation altogether. So that was their prerogative, and obviously it's an internal matter. But for our purposes, taking a moment to look at this from Penn State's perspective of moving forward at both those positions, at defensive end and linebacker, and some of the things that now have to happen in the middle of training camp. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications as always, and comment on YouTube and at State of State Pod. Justin, just first off the bat, when you heard the news about Lyons and Keys being off the team, did you have any sort of reaction, or was this kind of out of left field, or maybe you had an inkling that, like, hey, something wasn't okay? Any word on your end?
Damn. All right, that's like the first thing that came to mind. I hate to see when any guys get kicked out of the team, and that's Penn State or anywhere, because I mean, obviously for a coach to get to the point of dismissal from a team means that they kind of ran their course, or something that's just zero tolerance type of situation, which you never want for anyone, right? It's a great opportunity. But so it's always a bummer initially, but getting to the actual game of it, I mean, you lose depth and talent, right? When you talk about promising players. So a little bit of question marks from the standpoint of he had a lot of promise coming in. I know there were some good things speaking of it, but it's not necessarily a loss because it's not he wasn't like a cemented
Both guys
contributor. Yeah, I mean both guys, right? And this is so that's kind of my standpoint, which hopefully is not super serious and they can rebound from it. But for us now it's like next man up.
It initially began as an announcement they had been suspended for a personal matter, both Kaveion Keys and Jameial Lyons individual personal matters, and then they were off the team. They're completely gone. Let's start with Jameial Lyons at defensive end, because he was somebody that Penn State was looking to rely on in that rotation of four top defensive ends. We've talked about Abdul Carter switching from linebacker to defensive end, Deni Dennis Sutton being an established starter at defensive end, Amin Vanover, and then Jameial Lyons were expected to be the top four guys that you would potentially see. And then after that, it was Zariah Fisher. Fisher's down with an injury. And then Smith Vilbert is a name that a lot of people maybe glossed over, and it was somebody that James Franklin brought up in recent days. It was like, hey, Smith Vilbert is opening some eyes. Not that because Jameial Lyons is gone and, oh, wait, we have Smith Vilbert. It's just that the program has known about him for a long time, has played a lot of football. So you expect the program to exude publicly, oh, yeah, everything's good. We have good depth here. We're feeling great about this. But it does raise an important question, I think, about that defensive end room when two of those top 5 guys are unavailable and or not on the team at this point. Yes, there could be a lack of depth. And I think also looking at the defensive end room, outside of the names that we talked about, Carter, Dennis Sutton, Amin Vanover, and Smith Vilbert, just about everybody else is either a true freshman that literally just got on campus or is a redshirt freshman. So there is that lack of experience and size once you get past those top 4 at defensive end. Losing Lyons, also losing Fisher, somebody we haven't talked about much here. Does it give you pause, or do you feel confident in the group?
I mean, I think you feel confident in the group again when I go back to like just the coaching and the fundamentals of the group. But just I'm probably knowing too much. But I mean, football is 100% injury rate, so you have to take in some level of attrition with the roster going into the season, and just having a coach that can develop the next guys up. So when you have the raw materials like they've been recruiting, right? When you talk about guys that are big enough, strong enough, fast enough, and you can just develop them, that's where this comes into building a program. So my confidence level is pretty much still the same, and that kind of anchors a little bit on Deion Barnes.
Speaking of Deion Barnes, he had an outstanding quote in regards to the transition that Abdul Carter is undergoing, still going from linebacker to defensive end. And I think it's something a lot of fans just kind of assumed, well, moving a linebacker to defensive end, he'll be a pass rusher, and that's just presto. That's going to be easy. Deion Barnes has a quote that says, quote, he, Abdul, has been baptizing dudes on the other end. So not too often you hear that loud public statement about a guy, but that is obviously encouraging in regarding Abdul Carter going from linebacker to defensive end. So how do you feel about that?
I mean, you love to hear a coach bring on his personality because that's the type of personality his room is probably going to take on, right? Like a little bit of I can't say bashful, but a little boisterous and confident in their approach and like taking pride in baptizing people. So if that's something that's being celebrated within the room, you're going to see some pretty, I think, reckless and disciplined DNs coming in this season. But I love hearing that from a position coach, right? Because it's challenging not only his own guys to back it up, but he's kind of poking at, Phil on the other side because it was like, or the running backs, like who they baptizing? Because like if the coaches say like we're kicking their ass on that other side,
Right.
it's always interesting when you want to know about a position group. You do not ask that position coach, especially me. Like if I want to know about the receivers, I'm asking my pops about his perspective on the receivers. I want to know about the DBs. I'm going to ask Higgins about his perspective on the DBs because it's all about, okay, who's showing up against my guys, and that's probably the most unadulterated opinion that you're going to get on perspective. So you can see a little bit of that competitiveness of the former player Deion Barnes coming out saying like, hey, our guys are ready to go. So I love to hear it.
No, that makes perfect sense altogether. Looking at the rest of the defensive end room, I mentioned Carter, Vanover, Dennis Sutton, and Smith Vilbert as your primary 4 now. As I mentioned, it's a lot of freshmen and redshirt freshmen after that. So you have Malachi Williams, 6'3", 237-pound freshman. Zariah Fisher, I mentioned already, is redshirt senior, but is medically unavailable right now. Mason Robinson, redshirt freshman, 6'3", 245. Jalen Harvey, 6'2", 263, true freshman. Joseph Mpoyi, 6'5", 260, redshirt freshman. Bobby Mears, 6'4", 248, redshirt freshman. Jordan Mayer, 6'4", 231, redshirt freshman. And you and I talked about Max Granville, freshman, 6'3", 225, is already being described as flashing during training camp. He was the one who reclassified from being a recruit for the class of 2025 and now obviously on campus and as part of the Penn State football roster earlier than expected. So do you expect anyone from what you've heard outside of that top 4 of Carter, Dennis Sutton, Vanover, and Vilbert to hop in now that there is more opportunity at defensive end?
Do I expect anybody else to hop in? Is the
Yeah,
question?
in terms of like breaking into that rotation, seeing meaningful snaps in 2024.
I think they have to. So I'm not necessarily sure who, but I think someone has to come ready to play, I know it's one of James' strong philosophies is like raising the depth of the roster. And when you do that, you have to throw in those young bucks to see if they sink or swim. It's like when you have a newborn baby, it's like, hey, throw them in the water to see if they figure out how to tread water. And I think that's what they have to do with the younger guys, especially playing on the defensive line and on defense in general.
So we'll see what happens there at defensive end. In regards to, Dennis Sutton, you and I have talked about, is somebody who's assuming that starting position at defensive end. That feels like a natural progression and feels good. In terms of Amin Vanover and Smith Vilbert, again, Smith Vilbert's a guy who's flashed, has injury issues, those sorts of things, but he is the largest of those four defensive ends you're talking about. Having a guy who's 292 coming off the edge, you don't see a ton of that at the college level. Most of these guys are about 260 to 270 and, 6'3 to 6'5, 6'6 or something like that. So you have some really exciting athletes coming off the edge. Vanover and Smith Vilbert, what are your feelings on them?
Wait and see. I mean, no really feelings when you haven't produced. That's kind of my thing. So from that standpoint, when you produce, I'll have some feelings.
Fair enough. Looking at linebacker, Kaveion Keys, as we mentioned, dismissed from the team. And it was kind of that ongoing conversation you and I had about linebacker for a while. And it felt like Kaveion Keys was one of those guys on the short list to potentially be that second linebacker after Kobe King. Of the rest of the linebacker room now, it's all right. Kaveion Keys is out of the mix. We've talked a lot about Tony Rojas, Tamir Robinson, Dominic DeLuca, Keon Wiley, Kari Jackson. There's plenty of names that have gotten themselves into that mix. Also give a shout out to Tyler Elsdon, who's consistent senior at that position, friend of the show. So it's a matter of, all right, this guy is out. Who's possibly going to step up? Rojas, I think you and I think the world of altogether. And then Tamir Robinson is somebody that the coaching staff in the last few days have said he has flashed. He looks physically and mentally like he has taken a leap and that he has taken a step forward. So it could just be a process of that second guy by committee and kind of rotating them in accordingly. We've seen a lot of Dominic DeLuca and a lot of Tyler Elsdon over the years in select packages here. Do you like having that variety and option at linebacker altogether, or would you rather it really be like, I'd like it to be two guys confirmed, or are you comfortable with that churn?
Again, the depth. I love having a lot of guys that can play those positions because depending on what type of offense you play, whether it's Oregon or Ohio State or Michigan, you have to have some dynamic skill sets to be able to defend those different types of offenses. So when you have a plethora of linebackers that can do different things, but effectively stop the run, stop the pass, physical, do all those different type of things, it's just more than one way to skin a cat. When you have that, that's to your benefit because it comes down to, it's like boxing matches where it's like the style makes the fight. And then when we talk about football, I mean, a lot of times is the flexibility and options of the skill set of your players, right? And putting them in the best position when it's a matchup, even though if this player might be better than that player, but hey, physics say this guy might be better. And you want to build that amongst your roster. That's why you have positional standards and critical factors to make sure that you're building out a roster that a lot of guys can do different things, but execute the critical points that we need to execute. So when you have guys like that, I think that's extremely critical and it produces creativity from a defensive coordinator. And that's what you want from a coach is to have creativity birthed out of your personnel, not problem solving or trying to figure out limitations. So when you have that, I like the options to be able to lean into the creativity and do some fun things on the field.
And part of that ability to be creative with, for instance, the linebacker spot is because of the exceptional ability and depth and experience at safety. And we've talked a lot about how Zakee Wheatley, KJ Winston, and Jalen Reed are going to be such a big factor in this defense this year. And especially Jalen Reed, because the more that you hear questions asked about him of, is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? It's like he's kind of a little bit of everything. Comparisons to Jaquan Brisker, which is a very lofty sign of respect, in my opinion. Don't know if he's necessarily going to be that. We have to wait and see. But knowing that you have that chess piece that you can mask and put in a lot of different positions, that's a rarity in college football. And you would know better than anybody looking at Jalen Reed's game, being able to put him at outside linebacker, weak or strong, doesn't matter. safety, corner, nickel, dime, whatever packages that you're looking at. What does that do for a defense?
I mean, it does so much. I just had a post today where or it's a tweet where I mentioned for it's a speech I'm giving to a lot of guys that are entering high school, college, but it's just like earning your coach's trust and how beneficial that is to the overall operation. Because when they have trust in a player that you can move around, again, that creativity, to be able to be creative, you have to be able to trust players that they can pick up and process. There's a lot of um, there's a lot of intelligence on a football team that's just put into a different way. I'm talking about processing a lot, 15 different pieces of information or data points over like a 3 to 4 seconds and make a split decision, different ways, finding angles, all these different risk reward analysis is when you're going to take this play versus that. So when you have someone that you can trust and you can move them around and that you don't have to think about, that is a critical piece, because the one thing that you do not want is a bunch of guys that cannot think and move around and do different things with, because when that happens, it's a lot of anxiety for a coach to call things. And then you have to be a little bit on your heels in the sense of like, all right, we just can't mess up. Like we can't blow coverages. We can't let a free runner off. And the same thing with the offense. That's why a lot of times you'll see offensive coordinators lean into the less talented, safer receivers, right? Because like when I'm calling these different things, I got to check, they got to read the safeties or sit in the zone or run past, and man, like I need them to be there. And sometimes that comfort for a coach that player is going to do that, it supersedes the talent that a player may have. I think it's a coach's job to make sure that talent understands both and you get the most out of it. But when you can get to those different levels without it, it kind of shows some things up. I'm just kind of diving into that whole piece of like that trust of a coach, because when you're in a team setting, talent is talent is extremely important, but it's that trust to be able to use that talent in the right way that really separates great teams.
So those positions, defensive end and linebacker, kind of our 2 cents on how those spots are going to shake out now that you've seen Jameial Lyons and Kaveion Keys removed from the team. We sincerely wish them the best of luck, and hopefully whatever is going on in their lives, personally, professionally, spiritually, all those things, that they get to the right place and that they ultimately find some resolution to whatever is going on. So it's an unfortunate situation, but we wanted to take an opportunity here to look at those positions all together, and specifically how it's affecting the defense. For it to happen right at the beginning of training camp is obviously difficult positioning for this coaching staff, for the rest of the roster, because as a teammate, you're looking there and you obviously want to see your friends and your teammates compete along with you and continue forward on this process. So we wish them the best of luck. Hop in the comments section. Let us know what you guys think. How do you feel about defensive end and linebacker now that Lyons and Keys are no longer on the team? Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media, and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle @StateOfStatePod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.